Now that we've finished doing some sculpting, we're going to get back into modeling pretty hardcore. What we've modeled so far on the body is what I would call a buck. This is sort of an underlay. We have a form here, or an armature, onto which we're going to build the final geometry. This is basically just a placeholder while we build the detailed geometry on top of it. And this is an incredibly powerful workflow that's available to us here in Modo because of Modo's powerful retopology tools. And that's how we're going to be modeling. We're using retopology as a modeling workflow, basically, which I think is a pretty powerful concept. Now, if I show these backdrop images and go to the right view, you'll notice that we're matching fairly closely. It's not quite exact, but I'll take a look over here. See how these polys here at the point, if I follow those straight over to the left by just kind of following this row of polygons, that comes up above the frame here. And I was just perusing my reference imagery, and these are just things I Googled. Just go over to any search engine and type in the Fiat S76 Beast of Turin and look at the images, and you'll find a lot of images like these. Some of them are from the original cars, or some are from reproductions that have been made over the years. And you'll see a lot of useful stuff, one of which being that we have this single seam line that runs all the way across. It looks like there's a slight dog leg in there somewhere, but it's pretty consistent. It starts here at the back, goes forward, and then becomes the top edge of the frame, and that's where the bottom of the hood would come down. That's where the sprocket on the side kind of meets in with the side of the car. And then, of course, this rear panel comes straight up. I've got a close-up of it here from somebody building a reproduction, which is a beautiful reproduction, by the way. They've just really done an incredible job. So here's that seam line that comes straight down to where the frame would be, and it goes right up here in the back, and then this middle panel meets up with it abruptly. So that's what we'll be modeling, this rear panel right now. That's our first order of business. And as we model this, we're going to notice two things. First, this seam needs to be down lower than we have it currently in our model. And second, this rear side is a lot more bulbous than we have it. Right now, ours is a little too pointy. So we're going to make both of those changes right now. First of all, let's grab a radial or cylindrical fall-off. Either one of those from a side view does exactly the same thing. The difference is that the radial fall-off in a perspective view, of course, would allow us to have a three-dimensional sphere. Rather than just a circle. But in our case, that doesn't make any difference at all. So I'm just lining this up with the top edge of the frame, making sure this is roughly lined up there. And then also, after that, I will drop the tool, move my fall off up to here, something like so. And I just want to make sure that I'm getting this back part, W for move. And with the automatic action center, I can click over here just to move that action center up here, and I can bulge that out some to give it more of that bee stinger kind of look back here. That looks a little bit better. And you can experiment with different types of fall-offs or different shape presets. So if you go down to the fall-off settings here, under shape preset, we can do ease out, ease in, or linear, and see which one of those gives us the best result, or the result that we like the most anyway. In this case, I think linear is doing a pretty good job for me. We can obviously adjust that by hand later on if we want to, but I think that's pretty good. That looks okay. And that's a little more like it. So from here, we can actually start to build the final geometry. Now I'm going to hide those backdrop items. Let's head over to the Topo tab, and we'll just be using this mesh as an underlay for the real geometry. So first of all, in item selection mode, let's select this item and Shift-H to hide unselected, get rid of everything else. And we're going to be building right on top of this. So let's hit N for new mesh. I'll call this mesh my body panels, and we'll build these up one by one. Now, in this body panels mesh, before we start using topology, we can actually start from primitive geometry again, and that's going to make our lives a little bit easier. So rather than jumping straight to the topology pen and doing all of this manually, I think it'll be a lot easier if we just head to the Model tab, and let's hold the Control key and drop in a sphere. Now, the Control key is very similar to the Shift key. When we hold the Shift key and click, it's going to create a new item called sphere containing a sphere right? If we hold the Control key, it does the exact same thing except without creating a new item. We're working in our body panels mesh. If I Control click on sphere, it drops a sphere into that body panels mesh. Just a nice quick little shortcut. I'll go to the right view here. I'm going to rotate this holding the Control key before I start rotating to snap that to 15-degree increments. So we have nice 90-degree rotation. Scale this up a bit and move it forward. Our goal being to roughly approximate the shape of this panel. I'm going to select the front half of this and delete it. Select the bottom half of this and delete it, and go to, say, the back view and select the left side of this and delete it. So we're left with just this one corner. And then we can move and let's go to the left view. We're going to move and scale this so that it roughly approximates the shape we're trying to get to. And the reason for this is because it's already nice, clean geometry. Let me hit the Tab key. We've already got all the topology here that we need, so why would we want to go to the trouble of rebuilding all of that? It just seems like a lot of extra work for no reason. So using the primitives is a really nice way to go. Let's go to a front view, and I'm going to set my action center to the origin, scale that in. Again, the closer we get this shape to where we want it to be before we actually do any of the, sticking it to the rear surface, the more accurate the result is going to be. So let's get that about like so. That looks good. And finally, to get this on our background mesh, let's go to the Topology tab. And all we have to do is run any topology tool that affects all of this stuff, and it's automatically going to snap it to this underlying geometry. So let's go down here to the Smooth tool, click in the viewport, and there we go. Now, these points are inside right now, and that's because I believe they're snapping to some of this internal geometry. Remember, we modeled not just the exterior of the car, but there are some internal bits as well, and we've caught those. We can just grab the topology pen and drag, and when we do that, it will usually find the correct thing, whatever is on the outside. There we go. That's better. So, that's gotten us pretty darn close, right? Now, this rear stuff, we have a whole bunch of these little polygons that come to points at the back. And that's usually a no-no. We try to avoid that in our models because these are triangles, first of all, and we have one heck of a pole here at the back with lots of edges coming into it. So, really, that's not a big deal because the point of it is going to be sort of hidden. But we can delete that just to be good. We'll delete that. Take this stuff, R for scale. I'm going to go to the left view. Let me click over here with my automatic action center. Just scale those into about there. And then hit that Smooth tool again. It'll snap those to the surface. Then I can grab my topology pen. Let's drop that selection. Grab my topology pen, and I can just drag this stuff around to where we want it. Remember, you can drag edges as well as vertices to save time if you want. That looks pretty good. I'm fairly happy with that. So let's go to the top. I'm going to right drag this forward to where we want that seam to be, which I think is going to be right about here. And also let's go to that left view. We need for this stuff to be nice and flat on the bottom. So here's another trick for you. As you're working with retopology, by default we don't have move, rotate, or scale here in the topology area. And those are very useful tools to be able to use while retopologizing. For example, I'd like to be able to take all of these edges and scale them down on the Y so that they're flat. The problem is that by default, that's not going to keep them stuck to the background mesh because these don't have the proper background snap enabled for them. Only the tools listed here have background snap enabled by default. So what I can do is run the Scale tool, like I did before just now, and in the Automatic Action Center, I can click anywhere to define an action center. And finally, I'm actually going to manually turn on the background snap. To do that, we'll go here to our modeling tools. I'll just open those up real quickly. Head down to Mesh Constraints, Background, and then under Geometry Constraint type up here, we'll just change this to Point. Point mode is what the Topo pen and all the topology tools use. Just suffice it to say that. Okay, so oops, drop the tool there. R for scale. Here we go. We still have our constrained to background turned on with point mode enabled. I'll click over here, and now when I scale these, it is scaling on the Y, but it's also going to stay snapped to that background surface. Perfect. So I'll just scale that to 0, so this stuff is perfectly flat. That is looking pretty good to me. Let's select this stuff, and I'll zoom fit to get right in here on it. Take this topology pen, and I'm just going to drag these edges, again, just right down here to the edge. And we're getting really close to points here, but we're still maintaining quads. We're sort of forcing this because, I mean, we could go to use methods that would sort of decrease the number of edges as we approach this point. But those are going to, anything we do to mess with this topology is going to mess with the smoothness of our overall shape. And we really want this to be a very smooth overall shape. So I really don't want to mess with this topology. Let's keep nice, clean lines running straight back here. Let's go to the top view, select this stuff right here. And we want those to be at 0 again. We still have our constrain to background enabled because I haven't hit escape more than once. Hit R to scale. I'll hit Alt W to put that at the origin action center, or go to action center origin, either one. And then I'll scale to 0 on the X. That way I know that this stuff is nice and lined up this way. Finally, let's do these guys and make sure those are lined up nicely. Go down to where we turn the corner, R for scale, and scale to 0 on the Z. Perfect. Okay, so this is looking really good to me at this point, but if I rotate my view, I want you to notice something about this. See how, so the vertices, if we select them, are right on the surface. They're exactly on the surface we're trying to match, which is great. The problem is that the edges between those vertices fall significantly short of that exterior shape. That means that when I hit the Tab key, when I hit that Tab key, our surface is going to fall well inside of the desired result. So we actually want this stuff to fall closer, and the only way to do that is with more geometry, more vertices that will be stuck right to that surface. That will get us closer and closer to that underlying mesh. So to get more geometry, all we do is hit the D key for subdivide, and that's going to subdivide each of those polys into 4, which gets each of them much closer to the exterior surface. Now, one thing that's happening to me a lot is notice that some of these verts are falling now below the surface for apparently no reason. There is a reason, though. The reason is because we're not just dealing with the exterior polys of this underlying shape. Remember, we created some interior polys as well, and Moto is having trouble distinguishing between them. It's not sure which I want to snap to. So, to help it out, let's go back to our Model tab for a second. Select the buck geometry here, and let's just select the stuff that we need and nothing else. I'm going to select these exterior polys and expand this out so that we have just those, and then Shift H to hide unselected. That way we only have the exterior to worry about. Now let's select that other body panels mesh. We'll go back to our topology tab. And from here on out, whenever I do things, it's not going to snap to that interior geometry because it's not visible. So with that, let's go to poly mode, D for subdivide, and now we're stuck right there on the surface. And even if I hit the Tab key, we're very, very close to the surface, much closer than we were before. The only thing about doing the smooth operation, or the subdivision operation, would be to that it kind of messes up your corners. So just go ahead and manually correct those, get those where you want them. You could use the scaling tools like we did before. These ones on the front or on the back are probably going to be a little more difficult to work with. Looks like that one's going to work okay for me. You'll notice this polygon wasn't shaded. That's because it was highly non-planar. Highly non-planar polygons tend to get have trouble smoothing or have trouble displaying in OpenGL, but that's okay. This one's going to be a little trickier because it's right on this weird vertex edge, so I've just got to be very careful moving it around. It's going to be a little tricky. There we go. So now we have a nice smooth shape that approximates our body really well. Now you could use that exact same technique to model up the other panels. We can model the symmetrical version of this and also the bottom piece. So let's go ahead and practice doing that. I would recommend using that sphere technique. It works really nicely. So give that some practice, and once you're good with that, we'll go to the next video and work on some other techniques.